A millionaire CEO fired a pregnant waitress for being too slow. 5 years later, when he's dying in a hospital bed, the person fighting to save his life is the same woman he destroyed. But what her young son does next will leave you speechless. Before we start, tell us in the comments what city are you watching from. And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. Marcus Blackwood adjusted his Armani tie as he strode through the marble lobby of the Grand Meridian, Chicago's most exclusive hotel and restaurant. At 38, he owned a chain of luxury establishments that catered to the city's elite, and his reputation for perfection was as sharp as his tailored suits. Mr. Blackwood, his assistant Patricia hurried beside him, tablet in hand. The investors from Tokyo are arriving at 7. Everything needs to be flawless. It always is, Marcus replied coldly, his steel-gray eyes scanning every detail of the restaurant floor. A single wilted flower, a smudged wine glass, a server moving too slowly. Nothing escaped his notice. What's the status on table 12? The Henderson party. They've been waiting 8 minutes for their appetizers. 8 minutes. In Marcus's world, that was an eternity. He spotted the issue immediately. Sarah Chen, 6 months pregnant, moving carefully between tables with a tray that seemed too heavy for her condition. Her movements were deliberate, cautious, exactly what Marcus despised. "Fire her," he said without hesitation. Patricia blinked. "Sir?" "The pregnant waitress. She's slowing down the entire service." "Fire her? Tonight?" "Mr. Blackwood, she's been with us for 3 years. Her performance reviews are irrelevant if she can't keep pace. This is the Grand Meridian, not a charity." Marcus's voice carried the authority of someone who had never been told no. "Efficiency above all else. That's how we maintain our reputation." Sarah caught his eye across the room and offered a polite smile, completely unaware that her fate had just been sealed. Her hand rested protectively on her growing belly as she balanced another tray, her dedication evident in every careful step. Marcus felt nothing but cold calculation. Sentiment was expensive, and he had built his empire by eliminating every unnecessary cost. 3 hours later, Sarah Chen stood in Marcus's office, confusion evident in her dark eyes. The mahogany-paneled room overlooked Michigan Avenue, its floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the city lights like scattered diamonds. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Blackwood?" Sarah's voice carried a slight accent from her Korean heritage, mixed with the warm tones of someone who genuinely cared about her work. Marcus didn't look up from his laptop. "Your employment is terminated, effective immediately." The silence stretched for several seconds. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her stomach. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me correctly. Patricia has your final paycheck and severance package." He finally raised his eyes, meeting her shocked gaze with indifference. "Security will escort you out." "But why? Have I done something wrong? My reviews have always been excellent. My customers—" "Your performance has declined significantly," Marcus interrupted, his tone as cold as winter wind off Lake Michigan. "You're slow, inefficient, and frankly a liability in your current condition." Sarah's face flushed with a mixture of hurt and anger. "My condition? Mr. Blackwood, I'm pregnant, not disabled. I've never missed a shift, never had a single complaint. You took 8 minutes to serve the Henderson party their appetizers tonight. Mrs. Henderson specifically asked me to wait because her daughter was in the restroom." "Excuses!" Marcus closed his laptop with a sharp click. "The Grand Meridian requires excellence, not excuses. You're simply not meeting our standards anymore." Sarah stepped closer to his desk, her voice trembling but determined. "I have worked here for 3 years. 3 years of giving everything to this place. I stayed late when needed, covered shifts when others called in sick, and treated every customer like they were the most important person in the room. And now you're pregnant and slow. Business is business, Ms. Chen." "Business?" Sarah's voice cracked. "This is my livelihood. I'm having a baby in 3 months, Mr. Blackwood. I need this job. I need the health insurance." Marcus stood, straightening his jacket. "That's unfortunate, but it's not my problem to solve. Perhaps you should have considered the implications before getting pregnant." The cruelty of his words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She placed both hands on her belly, as if protecting her unborn child from the callousness filling the room. "You're heartless," she whispered. "I'm practical," Marcus replied. "Patricia will show you out." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, memorizing the face of the man who had just destroyed her security with such casual indifference. "You know what, Mr. Blackwood? Someday, life is going to teach you what it feels like to be powerless. Someday, you're going to need someone's kindness, and I hope whoever that person is shows you more mercy than you've shown me tonight." Marcus smirked. "Is that a threat?" "No," Sarah said quietly, gathering what remained of her dignity. "It's just the way the world works. What goes around comes around." "Patricia," Marcus called, "please escort Ms. Chen out." As Sarah walked toward the door, she turned back one final time. "For what it's worth, Mr. Blackwood, I hope your life is everything you think you deserve." The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Marcus alone in his office, already focused on tomorrow's profit margins. He had no idea that Sarah Chen's words were not just hope. They were prophecy. 5 years passed like pages turning in a book Marcus never bothered to read. His empire expanded. 3 more restaurants, 2 hotels, and a catering company that served Chicago's most exclusive events. Success bred more success, and Marcus's reputation for ruthless efficiency became legend in the hospitality industry. He had forgotten about Sarah Chen entirely, but Sarah had never forgotten him. Those 5 years had been the hardest of her life. Without health insurance, she'd struggled to pay for prenatal care. She'd worked 3 part-time jobs while pregnant, cleaning offices at night, serving coffee during early morning shifts, and babysitting in the afternoons. The stress had landed her in the emergency room twice, and she'd given birth to her son Daniel 2 weeks early, alone in a hospital bed because she couldn't afford to take time off for anyone to be with her. Daniel was now 5 years old, a bright-eyed boy with his mother's determination and a heart that seemed too big for his small chest. Despite their financial struggles, Sarah had raised him to be kind, to help others, to see the good in people even when the world showed them its worst face. She worked as a nurse's aide at Chicago General Hospital now, finally having saved enough for certification courses. The pay was better, the hours were steady, and she could afford decent child care for Daniel. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was a life she'd built through sheer will and determination. Marcus, meanwhile, had continued his pattern of treating employees as expendable resources. In 5 years, he'd fired dozens of people for minor infractions. A server who smiled too little, a chef who questioned his menu changes, a housekeeper who took too long cleaning rooms. His turnover rate was legendary, but so were his profits. On a cold February evening, Marcus was driving home from a business dinner in his Bentley Continental, talking on his Bluetooth headset about expansion plans in Los Angeles. The roads were icy from an unexpected winter storm, but Marcus was focused on the call, pushing his speed just above safe limits. "The LA market is perfect for our model," he was saying. "High-end clientele, image-conscious, willing to pay premium prices for exclusivity." The semi-truck ran the red light at the intersection of Michigan and Oak. Marcus saw it for perhaps 2 seconds before impact. His last conscious thought was irritation that this would make him late for his morning meeting. The Bentley crumpled like expensive paper. Marcus's body was thrown forward despite the airbags, his head striking the steering wheel with devastating force. Blood flowed from multiple cuts, and his breathing became shallow and irregular. The trucker, shaken but uninjured, immediately called 911. Within minutes, the intersection was flooded with flashing lights, sirens, and the organized chaos of emergency response. Inside the Chicago General Emergency Room, Sarah was finishing her shift When the ambulance call came in, major vehicle collision, male late 30s, head trauma, possible internal bleeding. The dispatch crackled over the radio. ETA 3 minutes. Sarah gathered supplies, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She'd assisted with hundreds of trauma cases over the past 2 years, each one reminding her why she'd chosen this work. Every person who came through those doors was someone's child, someone's hope, someone worthy of fighting for. The ambulance doors burst open, paramedics wheeling in a blood-covered man in an expensive suit. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She recognized the face immediately, even through the blood and swelling. Marcus Blackwood. The man who had destroyed her life with such casual cruelty was now broken and helpless on a gurney, his life hanging by threads. For a moment, Sarah froze. Every hardship, every sleepless night, every moment of fear and desperation from the past 5 years crashed over her. This was the man who had taken away her security when she was most vulnerable, who had shown her no mercy when she'd pleaded for her job. "Sarah!" Dr. Rodriguez called sharply. "I need you here, now." The professional in Sarah took over. Whatever her personal feelings, this was a human being who needed help. She pushed her emotions aside and moved to assist, her hands steady despite the storm of memories. As they worked to stabilize Marcus, cutting away his blood-soaked shirt, checking vitals, preparing him for emergency surgery, Sarah couldn't help but notice how fragile he looked. The powerful, intimidating man who had once loomed over her desk was now just another patient, dependent on the skill and compassion of others to survive. "He's lucky," Dr. Rodriguez murmured as they prepped Marcus for surgery. "A few minutes later, getting here, and we might have lost him." Sarah nodded, continuing her work with professional detachment. But inside, she was wrestling with a complex mix of emotions she wasn't prepared to feel. This was her chance for revenge, for cosmic justice. She could easily make a small mistake, a minor oversight that no one would question. Instead, she found herself being extra careful, double-checking every detail, ensuring that Marcus received the best possible care. Because that's who she was. The woman Marcus had dismissed as weak and expendable was now the person standing between him and death, and she was determined to save his life, not for his sake, but for her own. 3 days later, Marcus regained consciousness to find himself in a private room at Chicago General, his head wrapped in bandages and his body aching from dozens of injuries. The first face he saw was that of Dr. Rodriguez, explaining his condition with clinical precision. "You suffered a severe concussion, 3 broken ribs, and internal bleeding that required emergency surgery," the doctor said. "You're lucky to be alive, Mr. Blackwood. The response time was exceptional, and our trauma team worked around the clock to stabilize you." Marcus tried to speak but found his throat raw and dry. A nurse, someone he didn't recognize, helped him sip water through a straw. "The nurse's aide who assisted during your initial treatment," Dr. Rodriguez continued, "showed remarkable skill. She caught several critical details that might have been missed in the chaos. You owe your life to a lot of people, but she definitely played a crucial role." Over the next few days, as Marcus slowly recovered, he began to notice the staff around him. Most he didn't recognize, but there was something familiar about one of the nurse's aides, an Asian woman who always seemed to be just leaving when he was fully alert, who handled his care with professional competence but kept her interactions minimal. It wasn't until the 5th day, when she was adjusting his IV and thought he was sleeping, that he got a clear look at her face. Sarah Chen. The recognition hit him like a second collision. The pregnant waitress he'd fired 5 years ago was now part of the medical team keeping him alive. The woman he'd dismissed as weak and expendable had literally held his life in her hands. "I know you're awake," Sarah said quietly, not looking at him as she checked his chart. Your breathing changed. Marcus tried to sit up, but winced at the pain. "You're Sarah Chen, yes?" She finally met his eyes, and he saw something there he couldn't quite read. The pregnant waitress you fired for being too slow. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 5 years of unspoken consequences. "What are you doing here?" Marcus asked, his voice still hoarse. "My job," Sarah replied simply. "I'm a certified nurse's aide. I assist with patient care." Marcus looked around the room, taking in the irony. "You've been taking care of me." "I've been doing my job," Sarah corrected, "just like I was trying to do 5 years ago." "Sarah, Don't." Her voice was firm but not unkind. "Don't apologize now because you need me. Don't pretend you remember me fondly. We both know what happened." Marcus felt something he wasn't familiar with. Shame. "You could have..." "Could have what? Let you die? Made a mistake during treatment?" Sarah shook her head. "That's not who I am, Mr. Blackwood. That's who you are." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. "What happened to you?" Marcus asked quietly. After you left." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, debating whether to tell him. Finally, she set down his chart and looked directly at him. "I worked 3 jobs while pregnant. I cleaned offices at night, served coffee at dawn, babysat in the afternoons. I couldn't afford proper prenatal care. I ended up in the ER twice from stress and exhaustion." Her voice remained steady, but Marcus could see the pain in her eyes. "I gave birth alone because I couldn't afford to take time off. My son was born 2 weeks early, underweight, and I spent the first month of his life terrified he wouldn't survive." Marcus felt each word like a physical blow. "But he did survive," Hora continued. "Daniel's 5 now. He's brilliant and kind and sees the good in everyone, even when they don't deserve it. I put myself through certification courses, found this job, and built a life for us. Not the life I planned, but a good life." "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered. Sarah studied his face. "Are you? Are you sorry for what you did? Or are you sorry because you're lying in a hospital bed realizing that the person you threw away like garbage is now responsible for keeping you alive?" Marcus had no answer because he wasn't sure himself. "I have a question for you," Sarah said. "In the 5 years since you fired me, how many other people have you dismissed? How many lives have you disrupted because they didn't meet your standards of efficiency?" Again, Marcus had no answer, but the truth was written on his face. "That's what I thought," Sarah said softly. "I wasn't the first, and I wasn't the last. I was just another disposable person in your disposable world." She moved toward the door, then paused. "But here's what you never understood, Mr. Blackwood. Those disposable people, we're the ones who keep the world running. We're the ones who show up when you need us, even when you've given us every reason not to." As the door closed behind her, Marcus was left alone with the devastating realization that the woman he'd casually destroyed had just saved his life, and in doing so, had shown him exactly what kind of man he'd become. The next morning, Marcus was transferred out of the ICU to a regular recovery room. He asked the charge nurse specifically if Sarah Chen would continue as part of his care team. She requested to be reassigned, the nurse informed him, said there might be a conflict of interest. Marcus understood. Sarah had done her job, saved his life, and now wanted nothing more to do with him. The professional boundaries she maintained were probably the only thing that had kept her from walking away entirely. But Marcus couldn't let it go. Over the next few days, as he recovered, he found himself thinking constantly about their conversation. He began asking staff members about Sarah, learning pieces of her story. She was studying to become a full nurse. She volunteered at a children's literacy program on weekends. Her son Daniel was starting kindergarten in the fall. Marcus also began reflecting on his own actions over the past 5 years. He had Patricia pull employee records, terminations specifically. The list was longer than he'd expected. 37 people fired for what he'd called performance issues, but what now seemed like minor infractions or temporary circumstances. A server who'd been dealing with his mother's cancer diagnosis, a housekeeper who'd been attending night school, a chef who'd been struggling with diabetes, a bartender who'd been going through a divorce. All of them had been people with lives, struggles, and stories he'd never bothered to learn. Marcus hired a private investigator to track down what had happened to Sarah during those 5 years. The report that came back was a detailed account of hardship that made him physically sick to read. The 3 jobs, the medical bills, the months when she'd had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries, the time she'd walked to work to save bus fare, the night classes she'd attended after Daniel was asleep studying by lamplight because she couldn't afford to keep the overhead lights on. All of it could have been avoided if he'd simply shown her a fraction of the mercy she'd shown him. Marcus was discharged after 8 days in the hospital. His first stop wasn't his penthouse apartment or his office. It was the hospital gift shop, then the pediatric ward, where he'd learned Daniel Chen spent time while his mother worked. He found the boy in the children's playroom, a small, serious-faced child who looked remarkably like his mother. Daniel was reading to a group of younger children, his clear voice bringing animated characters to life. "That was wonderful," Marcus said, when Daniel finished the story. "You're a very good reader." Daniel looked up with curious eyes. "Thank you. Are you visiting someone?" "Actually," Marcus said carefully, "I was hoping to talk to your mom. I'm Marcus Blackwood." Recognition flickered across Daniel's face. "Mom mentioned you. You're the man who was in the car accident." "That's right. Your mom helped take care of me." Daniel nodded solemnly. "Mom takes care of lots of people. She says it's important to help when someone needs it, even if they haven't been nice to you." The simple wisdom of a 5-year-old hit Marcus harder than any business rival's criticism ever had. "Your mom is a very good person," Marcus said. "The best," Daniel agreed. "She works really hard so we can have a nice life." When Sarah arrived to pick up Daniel, she froze when she saw Marcus sitting with her son. "Mr. Blackwood," she said carefully, "you shouldn't be here." "I know." Marcus stood, his movements still careful due to his injuries. "But I needed to see you, to talk to you." "We have nothing to talk about." "Please," Marcus said. 5 minutes." Sarah looked at her son, who was watching the interaction with interest, then back at Marcus. "Daniel, go gather your things. We need to go home." Once Daniel was out of earshot, Sarah crossed her arms. "What do you want?" "To make it right," Marcus said simply. "You can't make it right. You can't give me back those 5 years. You can't erase the nights I went to bed hungry so Daniel could eat. You can't undo the fear, the stress, "I know," Marcus interrupted. "I know I can't undo any of it. But I want to try to make amends." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Amends? What kind of amends could possibly matter now?" Marcus pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "This is a check for $200,000. It's not payment for what I did. Nothing could pay for that. It's acknowledgement of the damage I caused and the strength it took for you to overcome it." Sarah stared at the envelope, but didn't take it. "I don't want your money." "Then use it for Daniel, for his education, his future, his opportunities." "I said I don't want your money," Sarah repeated firmly. "Keep your guilt money, Mr. Blackwood. I don't need it." "Then what can I do?" Marcus asked desperately. "How can I make this right?" Sarah looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that might have been pity. "You want to make amends?" she said quietly. "Stop. Stop treating people like they're disposable. Stop firing people for having human problems. Stop thinking that your money gives you the right to destroy lives." Marcus nodded. "I will. I promise I will." "Promises are easy, Mr. Blackwood. Change is hard." As she walked away with Daniel, Marcus realized she was absolutely right. Promises were easy. He'd made them before, usually to business partners or investors. But this was different. This was a promise to himself about the kind of man he wanted to become. The question was whether he was strong enough to keep it. Marcus returned to work 2 weeks later, but everything felt different. The marble floors that had once represented success now reminded him of the cold indifference he'd shown his employees. The bustling restaurant that had been his pride now seemed like a machine that ran on human misery. His first meeting was with Patricia and his management team to review operations during his absence. "We had to terminate 3 more employees while you were recovering," Patricia reported. "A server who was consistently 2 minutes late, a busboy who broke his second wine glass this month, and a cook who questioned the new menu specifications." Marcus felt sick. "Bring me their files." Patricia looked surprised but complied. Marcus reviewed each case, seeing patterns he'd been blind to before. The server who was late had been taking public transportation because her car had broken down. The busboy was 18 years old, working his first job to help support his younger siblings. The cook was a 15-year veteran whose only offense was suggesting a modification that would reduce food waste. "Rehire all 3, Marcus said. "Sir?" Patricia blinked. "They've already been terminated. We followed protocol." "I said rehire them, with back pay for the time they were out, and I want to review every termination from the past 5 years." Patricia exchanged glances with the other managers. "Mr. Blackwood, that's over 40 people. Many of them have moved on, found other jobs. Then we'll find the ones we can and make it right." What followed were the most difficult conversations of Marcus's life. He personally called every terminated employee he could locate, not to offer their jobs back. Many had found better positions, but to apologize and offer compensation for the hardship his decisions had caused. Some hung up on him, others listened in stunned silence. A few accepted his apologies, though he could hear the wariness in their voices. One woman, a housekeeper he'd fired for taking too many bathroom breaks, not knowing she was dealing with a medical condition, cried when he apologized. "You have no idea what that did to my family," she said through tears. "But yet, thank you for calling. It means something." Marcus also instituted new policies at his establishments: a family emergency fund for employees facing unexpected hardships, paid sick leave, educational assistance programs, profit-sharing bonuses. He hired an HR director whose job was specifically to advocate for employee welfare. His profit margins took a hit, but employee turnover plummeted. Customer satisfaction scores improved. The restaurant's reputations shifted from being known for rigid perfection to being known as places where staff genuinely cared about providing excellent service. But the person Marcus most wanted to make amends to remained unreachable. He'd tried to contact Sarah multiple times, through the hospital administration, through mutual acquaintances, even through Daniel's school. Each time the message came back the same: she didn't want to see him. 3 months after his accident, Marcus was reviewing financial reports when Patricia brought him an unexpected piece of news. "There's a situation at Chicago General," she said. "Apparently, one of their best nurses' aides is facing termination due to budget cuts. The nursing staff is petitioning to save her position, but administration says their hands are tied." Marcus looked up from his papers. "Why are you telling me this?" Patricia hesitated. "It's Sarah Chen." Marcus felt his heart stop. "What?" "The hospital is facing budget shortfalls. They're eliminating several support positions. Her supervisor called because he knows about your history and wondered if there might be anything you could do." Marcus was on his feet before Patricia finished speaking. "Get me the hospital administrator on the phone, now." The conversation with Dr. Margaret Wells, Chicago General's chief administrator, was brief and direct. "We're looking at a $3 million shortfall," Dr. Wells explained. "We have to cut somewhere, and nurses' aide positions are easier to eliminate than nursing or physician roles." "What would it take to save Sarah Chen's position specifically?" Marcus asked. "Mr. Blackwood, I can't make exceptions for individual employees based on personal relationships." "What would it take to save all the positions being eliminated?" Dr. Wells was quiet for a moment. "All of them? We're talking about 12 full-time positions. That would require approximately $400,000 annually." "Done," Marcus said without hesitation. "I'll endow a fund to cover those salaries indefinitely. $8 million should provide sufficient annual income to maintain the positions in perpetuity. Mr. Blackwood, that's extraordinarily generous, but I have to ask why. Because those 12 people deserve to keep their jobs, because they have families depending on them, and because someone once taught me that how we treat people when they're vulnerable says everything about who we really are. The announcement was made the following day. The Marcus Blackwood Employee Security Fund would ensure that no support staff positions at Chicago General would be eliminated due to budget constraints. Sarah learned about it from her supervisor, Dr. Rodriguez, who called her into his office with a smile she hadn't seen in weeks. "The good news is you're keeping your job," he said. "The extraordinary news is how it happened." When he explained about the endowment, Sarah sat in stunned silence. "He did this for you?" Dr. Rodriguez said gently. "He didn't ask for publicity, didn't ask for recognition. He just wanted to make sure you kept your job." Sarah's first instinct was anger. How dare he interfere in her life again? How dare he think his money could fix what he'd broken? But then she thought about her 11 colleagues who would also keep their jobs. The single mothers, the young men working their way through school, the older workers who couldn't afford to start over. Marcus hadn't just saved her position, he'd saved all of them. That evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table helping Daniel with his homework, trying to process what had happened. Her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Sarah, it's Marcus. Please don't hang up." She almost did, her finger hovering over the end call button. "How did you get this number?" Patricia tracked it down. "Sarah, I want you to know that the hospital fund isn't about you. Well, it is about you, but it's not just about you. It's about doing what's right." "You can't buy forgiveness," Sarah said quietly. "I know. I'm not trying to. I'm trying to be the person I should have been 5 years ago. I'm trying to be someone worthy of the mercy you showed me when I was lying in that hospital bed." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "You fired me when I was 6 months pregnant." "Yes." "You took away my security, my health insurance, my livelihood when I was at my most vulnerable." "Yes." "You showed me no mercy, no compassion, no basic human decency." "You're right about all of it," Marcus said, his voice heavy with genuine remorse. "I was cruel and heartless, and I destroyed your life because I could. Because you couldn't fight back. Because I had power, and you didn't. So why should I forgive you now?" Marcus was quiet for so long that Sarah thought the call might have dropped. "You shouldn't," he finally said. "What I did was unforgivable. But I'm asking anyway, not because I deserve it, but because I've learned that forgiveness isn't about what people deserve. It's about who you choose to be." Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes. "I saved your life." "Yes, you did. Even after what you did to me, I saved your life. And that tells me everything I need to know about who you are," Marcus said softly. "You're everything I wasn't, kind where I was cruel, merciful where I was ruthless, strong where I was weak." "I don't want your money," Sarah said. "Then what do you want?" Sarah looked across the room at Daniel, who was reading quietly on the couch, his face serious and focused, just like hers used to be when she studied for her certification courses by lamplight. "I want to know that you've changed," she said finally. "Not just your policies or your procedures, but you. I want to know that no other pregnant woman will ever sit in your office begging for her job while you throw her away like garbage. Never again," Marcus promised. "I swear to you, Sarah, never again. And I want to meet with some of those other people you fired. I want to hear their stories. I want to know what you're doing to make amends to them. Whatever you want to know, whatever access you need, it's yours." Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "This doesn't mean we're friends." "Marcus, I know. And this doesn't mean I trust you. I understand. But—" Sarah took a deep breath. "It might mean I'm willing to see if you can become someone worth trusting." 6 months later, Sarah stood in the community center on the south side of Chicago, watching Marcus read to a group of children as part of the literacy program they'd developed together. The Marcus Blackwood Foundation had partnered with local organizations to create job training programs, emergency assistance funds, and educational scholarships for families in need. Daniel sat in the front row, his face bright with attention, as Marcus brought the story characters to life with animated voices and gestures. The same man who had once fired Sarah for being too slow now took his time with each page, making sure every child understood and enjoyed the story. "He's gotten better at that," Sarah observed to Patricia, who had become an unlikely friend over the past months. "He practices at home," Patricia admitted with a smile. "He's actually quite nervous about reading to children. He wants to do it right." After the reading session, Marcus approached Sarah carefully. Their relationship had evolved slowly from wary tolerance to cautious respect to something that might eventually become friendship. Trust was still fragile between them, but it was growing. "How did I do?" he asked, genuinely seeking her approval. "Much better," Sarah said. "You only lost them once when you rushed through that dialogue on page 12. Marcus nodded seriously, making a mental note. "I'll work on that for next time." Sarah watched him with something approaching fondness. The transformation hadn't been immediate or dramatic. Real change never was. But it had been consistent and genuine. Marcus had spent months not just changing his policies, but examining his assumptions, confronting his prejudices, and learning to see his employees as whole human beings rather than interchangeable parts in his business machine. "There's something I want to show you," Marcus said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. Sarah's expression became guarded. "If that's another check—" "It's not money," Marcus interrupted. "It's letters. From some of the people I fired over the years, people I've made amends to." Sarah took the envelope, curious despite herself. Inside were handwritten letters from former employees, some thanking Marcus for his apologies and compensation, others sharing how his actions had affected their lives, and a few offering forgiveness for past wrongs. One letter, from the housekeeper, who had cried on the phone, particularly moved Sarah. "Mr. Blackwood, when you fired me, I thought my life was over. I was ashamed to tell my children why I lost my job, ashamed to apply for unemployment, ashamed to start over at my age. Your apology doesn't change what happened, but it helps heal something inside me that I didn't even know was broken. Thank you for seeing me as a person worth apologizing to." "She's working again," Marcus said quietly as Sarah read, "at a medical office that appreciates her reliability and gives her the flexibility she needs for her health condition. I helped her find the position, but she earned it herself." Sarah folded the letters carefully. "Why are you showing me these?" "Because I want you to know that what happened to you wasn't isolated, and the changes I've made aren't just about you. They're about becoming the kind of person who deserves the second chance you gave me." Across the room, Daniel was organizing books with the other children, his natural leadership evident as he helped the younger ones reach the higher shelves. "He wants to be a doctor," Sarah said, watching her son, "like the ones who helped you when you were hurt." "He'll be a good one," Marcus observed. "He has his mother's heart." Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but something closer to it. Peace, maybe. The anger she'd carried for so long was becoming something else, something lighter. "Marcus," she said, using his first name for the first time since his recovery. "Yes?" "I'm proud of you." The simple words hit Marcus harder than any business success ever had. He felt tears prick his eyes and didn't try to hide them. "That means everything to me," he said honestly. "The man who fired me 5 years ago wouldn't have cared about a group of children learning to read. He wouldn't have spent his Saturday afternoon on the South Side helping kids from families he would have considered beneath his notice." "That man was a stranger to me now," Marcus said. "I don't know how I became him, but I know I never want to be him again." Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of that admission. "Change isn't easy, but it's possible." "You taught me that," Marcus said, "when you saved my life despite having every reason to let me die. You showed me that people can choose to be better than their worst impulses." As the afternoon wound down and families began collecting their children, Daniel ran over to Sarah and Marcus, his arms full of books he'd organized. "Mom, Mr. Marcus said next week we're going to read stories about doctors and nurses," Daniel announced excitedly, "and he said, maybe someday when I'm a real doctor, I can come back and read to the kids too." Sarah looked at Marcus with surprise. "You're planning that far ahead?" "I hope to be," Marcus said quietly, "if you'll let me." 2 years later, Sarah stood in the auditorium of Chicago General Hospital, watching Marcus deliver the keynote speech at the annual Employee Recognition Ceremony. She wore her new supervisor's badge with quiet pride. She had been promoted to lead the cardiac care team after completing her advanced nursing degree. Marcus had kept every promise he'd made. The Blackwood Foundation now operated in 12 cities, providing job training, emergency assistance, and educational scholarships. His restaurants had become models for employee-centered business practices, with waiting lists of people wanting to work there. But more importantly to Sarah, he had become a genuine friend, not just to her, but to Daniel, who was now 7 and still insisted on calling him Mr. Marcus, despite repeated invitations to drop the formality. "The greatest lesson I've learned," Marcus was saying from the podium, his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium, "is that the measure of a person isn't how they treat those who can help them, but how they treat those who cannot." His eyes found Sarah in the audience, and he smiled. Not the calculated expression he'd once worn, but something genuine and warm. "I stand here today because a woman I had wronged chose mercy over revenge, healing over hatred. She saved my life in more ways than one, and I will spend the rest of my days trying to be worthy of that gift." After the ceremony, Sarah found Marcus in the hospital cafeteria, sitting with Daniel and helping him with his math homework. "Carry the 1, remember?" Marcus was saying patiently. 7 plus 6 equals 13, so you write the 3 and carry the 1. "Oh, I get it now," Daniel exclaimed, then looked up at Sarah. "Mom, Mr. Marcus is really good at math, too." "Among other things," Sarah said, sitting down beside them. Marcus looked up from the homework. "How does it feel to be supervisor of the cardiac unit?" "Terrifying and wonderful," Sarah admitted. "I keep thinking about that scared pregnant woman who got fired 6 years ago. She never could have imagined this." "That woman had more strength than she knew," Marcus said quietly. "She just needed the world to stop trying to break her long enough for her to show it." Daniel, oblivious to the deeper conversation, tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Mr. Marcus, are you coming to my school play next week? I'm playing the doctor who saves the day." "Wouldn't miss it," Marcus replied solemnly, "though I think you're already pretty good at saving the day." As they walked out of the hospital together, Sarah reflected on the strange turns life could take. The man who had once been her worst enemy had become one of her closest friends. The job that was supposed to be temporary had become a calling. The future that had once seemed impossible was now unfolding in ways she'd never dared to dream. "Sarah," Marcus said as they reached the parking garage. "Yes?" "Thank you for everything, but mostly for showing me that it's never too late to become the person you were meant to be." Sarah smiled, watching Daniel skip ahead toward their car. "Thank you for proving me right." "About what?" "That everyone deserves a second chance, even you." As they parted ways in the parking garage, Sarah felt a deep sense of completion. The circle that had begun with cruelty and desperation had closed with friendship and hope. Some stories end with dramatic gestures and grand revelations. The best ones end with the quiet recognition that ordinary people, through small acts of extraordinary grace, have the power to change everything. Sarah Chen had been fired for being too slow. Marcus Blackwood had been saved for being ready to change. And Daniel Chen was growing up in a world where both of those things could be true at the same time. What do you think of Sarah and Marcus's journey? Did they both make the right choices? Share your thoughts in the comments below, And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories that prove it's never too late to change your life.